record button, bang, and we're on. Right, guys, this is Homie and the Dude, episode 14. We're really excited for this one, guys, but first, before I get into it, we have a note from our sponsor. It's Veast.kitchen, guys. That's all you have to look up to get to their website. It's a new vegan takeaway in Bristol that is a pickup in the center. They do amazing food. Really can't stress enough. You also still have 2 hours to order for Saturday and then pick it up on Saturday. They will cook your home meal, date night, whatever it is. If you're lonely by yourself, whether you're with your lady, your man, your dog, order a meal and enjoy it. Tom, hit them with the menu. Tell them what's going on this week.
I've got the menu. So basically, the way it works, you like that? Yeah, so basically the way it works is it's pre-orders up until the day before. So this is for Saturday night, and as today is Friday night, you have until 8 o'clock tonight to order for tomorrow's pickup. And that's how it works every week. So for tomorrow night, the starter is seitan chicken satay with Thai vegetable salad. So seitan faux chicken in a rich peanut satay sauce served with a Thai vegetable salad tossed in a lime, sesame, and soy dressing. So that's the starter. Then the main is roasted miso marinated aubergine. So aubergine is eggplant, yeah,
eggplant for Americans.
And butternut squash. I've had that actually, and it's amazing. Roasted miso marinated aubergine eggplant with sweet and savory maple and soy sauce. There's green rice. There's seared tender stem broccoli. So that's all the main. And then also light and fluffy couscous salad. I'm still going with the main, guys. Then there's a dessert. Coconut and 5-spice creamy pudding, and then the chef always adds a little treat at the end, which is usually like a little truffle or a little cube of fudge or whatever. It's baller.
You guys get all of that for £19. All I'm saying, vegan burgers are 15 quid these days. That's £19, guys. Yeah.
Promise you will be very satisfied. So reach out to Veast.kitchen and you will be happy.
Yeah,
great. Paying the bills, guys. We've got to pay the bills, man.
Next thing is, guys, we recently hit 300 likes on Facebook. We are so chuffed with that. That is over halfway to our first goal, which is 500 likes, guys. Every single one of you that has helped us out. This man in front of us is one of those guys. Been around since the beginning. So please, guys, keep doing that. Keep hitting that like button. Hit us with that Holy Trinity. You know how it is. Share at least one post. It doesn't matter which post. Share one post. Then I would like to see you like and follow the Facebook page. From there, it takes 1 second to hop over to the YouTube channel. One quick link click on Facebook. Hit that subscribe button, and you will be all up to date with all that we do. That is it. The Holy Trinity.
You're on your game. You're on your game right now.
Always. Right. Today we are joined by the amazing Sven Stears, or Toucan as his art name. How you doing today, dude?
I'm all right, man. How are you?
Good. Feeling great. Feeling much better now that we're doing this.
Yeah. I've been looking forward to this all week.
Glad to have you, man.
Yeah.
So you know Bodhi. I don't think we've ever met. I missed one night where like my family got together to meet a show that you were putting on. So it was what the
art battle.
The art battle, yeah. So I was working or something like that, so I didn't get to meet you for that. But yeah, nice to finally meet. Yeah, exactly. A name that I've heard, lots and lots, and so yeah, awesome.
Hopefully, always in a good context.
Always, dude. Always.
Yeah. So basically, for people who don't know, me and Sven actually worked together at a fundraising call center. We actually started on the exact same day and worked through together, which was absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
It's interesting because what drew me to you kind of instantly is, you're a bit out there, you're a little bit different. You're also very boisterous and upfront, which I really liked about you. And then you started telling me more about your story, dude, and the creative shit that you do. And that's when I really started not only enjoying your company a lot, but also respecting you as a person massively, dude. So give us a bit of a track of like what's happening, where you came from, and where you're at kind of at this point with your creative process and where you're at.
Whoa, nice small question to start off with, man.
I know, right?
Tell me everything about you as an artist. Go.
Let's get your journey.
So yeah, like when we first met at NTT, I think I was a very different person. Like I was still drinking and using drugs at that point, and now completely clean and sober, and have been for coming up on 15 months now.
Nice,
Amazing.
dude. Wait,
yeah,
pause,
so like,
pause, dude. Well done. Like
Oh, yeah.
seriously,
Thank
that's
you very much.
that's a big thing, bro.
yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, it's been a bit of a journey. But like what you just sort of alluded to there when we first met, I was a really kind of boisterous person. Like, I think I probably still had some redeeming qualities back then, but I was just angry and furious and boisterous and attention seeking and all these kind of traits of behavior that were what got me so far in life. Like, I did have a career as a poet, and I was sort of becoming an artist and starting things like Art Battle and all those kind of projects that I didn't launched into. But it's only sort of since I've got clean and sober that I've had sort of more of a spiritual awakening, and become a much more well-rounded person. Like, if someone else is talking, I can sit in silence now and listen, which is completely alien to me 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was a whole thing around that time where I kind of stopped doing poetry as well. It used to be like a massive artistic outlet for me, and I put so much pressure on myself to achieve and perform and do stuff that it kind of mounted up. And then because I wasn't getting gigs and I was drinking too much, all that kind of stuff, I fell out with a lot of people in the poetry scene, kind of a big blazing fiery exit. And after I reached a point where I should have been launching off of as well. And then just stopped doing poetry, quit, didn't do anything for a while. But then discovered, in a way, that led me to the sort of visual art stuff, and I drove more into that. So where the pressure to perform and achieve in the poetry was insurmountable for me at the time, I had nothing to stake, nothing to lose with the visual art. So I just launched myself into that, and especially because I started doing graffiti and street art and spray painting. If you get something wrong in the world of graffiti, like, someone else will come along in a day or 2 days or a couple of hours and completely go over it. So there's the impermanence of the graffiti was really inspiring. And then, like, when you do achieve and you do something well with graffiti and it's still there like a month later, like, nice, well done me.
Yeah.
It's a really, really nice feeling. There was actually one piece I did that was in the old, do you know the Bear Pit?
Yeah.
So when the Bear Pit it used to be sort of a bit run down, a bit sort of, well, Bristolian, with all the sort of stuff going on the outsides.
Yeah.
There was, you're allowed to spray paint it in there. So like broad daylight, you just walk down, can up, off you trot. And like families walking past be like, you're allowed to do that? There's one family from New York. And I'm like, wait, you're allowed to do that? I'm like, yeah, kind of.
You're like, New York, the home of like graffiti and like
Exactly.
covering trains and
Exactly. It was really ironic, and I really enjoyed that moment. I was like, this is cool. I'm being watched by guys from New York because I put a terrible, terrible bird on a wall. But when that sort of the thing happened in Bristol, took the Bear Pit away from the people and sort of made it into what it is now, all that artwork, all that graffiti, all that stuff got taken down. It happened twice. So that got taken down, and I was like, oh, it's gone. Sad Sven. And then like a month later, it was back up, and I was like, yay! Like, someone saw fit to put it back up.
Yeah.
And people graffitied around it as well and left it, and I was really, really chuffed with that. And the people, when it did come down, that painting is now like in someone's house or something. That was a really sort of like big, happy.
So it was something you hung up?
No. So I've not described it well. It was a board that had been framed and
I
left.
see. Okay.
And there were a couple of those.
Yeah.
So I was like, that's blank. Off I go. Put something there.
So they took it down, and then stored it or something like that.
Yeah.
And then did they sift through and put up certain ones, or did they put it all back up, or?
So the one that I made came down, and I didn't have the presence of mind then to be like, I wonder what's happened to all the other art.
Yeah, right. You're just.
But they basically blacked it all out, I think, and mine went back up, and I was really, really chuffed with that.
Nice.
Yeah, it was a nice achievement. And then, like, when I sort of stopped doing graffiti because I got into some trouble doing that, I moved over to the visual art, which was like the canvas is what I mean to say.
Yeah.
So that was, again, sort of like another evolution that was really sort of just, I can do this at home. Yay.
Yeah.
I don't need to be on a street corner in the cold. Woo.
Yeah, you don't need to like possibly get arrested or have to like
Right?
be shrouded in like dark gear, looking like a cat burglar at
Yeah.
4 in the morning with a
Yeah.
backpack full of spray can, right?
And faces this handsome aren't made for prison.
Exactly. No, they are made for prison, actually.
Hey, I got a question for you.
Go for it.
Because I've thought about this. I've seen some like awesome graffiti, and then like a week later, I've seen someone just put a tag over it.
Yeah.
So what
Right.
is like, is there an unspoken, like to me, I would love to see a rule which is whatever's created, if you can top it, then top it, like literally cover it. If you can't, then leave it the fuck alone so people can appreciate it. But is there a rule like in the community?
So, like, first of all, preface everything I'm about to say by like, I am by no means an expert in street art. I got into it at a very late age. I dabbled for a bit, and then I was like, I'll go do something else. But like, so my understanding is that kind of pretty much what you said. If someone's done a really, really amazing piece and you are a toy, you've only been in the scene for a little period, like you shouldn't do it. But there's also a fair amount of turf warery, if that's a word, that goes into graffiti culture. So you might not like a particular artist and you'll just like put a line through it or write toy on it or just, white wall it if you're feeling particularly mean.
So what's toy mean?
So a toy is someone who's like a wannabe, a tryhard, someone who's not earned their stripes, I guess is the best way of saying it.
Like a toy boy?
So,
like by most definitions, I would be a toy. I did it. I spent a short period in the graffiti, thought I was a lot better than I probably was, and made some definitely not friends in the process. So yeah, it's just someone who's like not earned their stripes.
Have you seen the what they did to the breakdancing Jesus near the Hamilton House?
No.
So breakdance, the breakdancing Jesus on the side of the wall by the Hamilton House.
Yeah.
They'd like scribble out the like.
They've just done a big paint slash.
Which sucks.
Oh.
And I mean, I think there's a story behind the Banksy thing that the one where he's hanging from the window. There's
the blue wall, the blue paint.
Yeah. I think the story I heard was that he supports one of the Bristol football teams. And
oh god, that's so
yeah, and so
of course it would be that mundane. Of course it's that mundane.
So the other team's colors, I think, are blue because that's what's like splashed up.
Because you got green. I think the green is the Rovers or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be killed when someone from Bristol is like, "You're getting it wrong."
Right, they're gonna like spray paint.
You got football wrong.
Yeah. No, but yeah, ridiculous that it's that mundane. I was actually going to ask then, because obviously, you said that you did poetry and then transition into like more visual arts and whatnot. I was going to ask, like, as a kid, were you like into drawing and stuff? Obviously, you said the poetry and the written stuff kind of came first, but were you doing doodles? Were you doing anything like that when you were younger?
Yeah. No, I've always kind of been arty as a kid, to the point where when I was really young, like I think must have been like year 4 or 5 or something. I don't know what that is in American.
It's like year 4 or 5.
It's like 5 or 6.
No.
It's the year above. Yeah.
Yeah. So age group, about 10.
Yeah.
10, 11.
10 years old.
Yes. Is that what you meant?
Maybe
No, I meant year 5 or 6.
That sounds about right because I know where I've moved around a lot and I know which house I was at 10, and it sounds about right.
Yeah.
So my parents bought me a subscription to like an art magazine-y thing, and it's not really art, it was all comics and drawing for kids, but I remember having that, and every sort of time it arrived, like going and putting the paper and then trying the new thing and stuff. But it's not something that I stayed at with like I did with the poetry.
Yeah.
You guys remember a website called Deviantart?
Yeah, aren't they still around?
Yeah, they are.
They're huge, aren't they?
Yeah, they're absolutely massive. But I was back on DeviantArt when it was first around, like when the internet was new, when we had dial-up modems,
and buffering.
Right? Yeah, you'd upload a picture and it'd take half an hour.
I was gonna say, do you remember it would load from the top of the screen and you'd be like, "Holy fuck! I didn't realize that there was so much sky in this photo."
Right? Yeah. So Yeah, I used to upload drawings to that, and they were all emo, and like I was a dirty grunger when I was younger, so like it was all horrible, terrible arts, and I'd put poetry on there of this similar vein. And when I got to my A levels, I discovered photography. I took a photography course at A level and did that, and discovered Photoshop, and moved into that sort of digital manipulation side of stuff, which has kind of grown into what I do for work now, because I do a lot of the like illustration for NTT now too. So like all spectrum, like, yeah, from a very young age. But like the visual art was always outside of school. Like when it came to going into an art class, I just doss off. Like, yeah, I'm gonna throw some paint at the person sat next to me or whatever. I was a horrible kid.
Do you know what? Like it's interesting. I something that I found in school and stuff that really I think inhibited me with some of the more creative stuff, because don't get me wrong, I'm dyslexic. I'm not academic. Like don't get me wrong, I can hold my own because I'm not like as severe dyslexic, I guess. So I can hold my own. I'm good enough that I got grades and whatnot. But I ended up choosing more things that were like, more, I guess, academic in the end of it. But for me, the thing that really pushed me away from it is I really wanted to do music. Like music was a big one for me as a kid. I really was like I wanted to learn how to play guitar. I also wanted to do like more music tech stuff in terms of like Ableton Live and, production and things like that. And my school really shunned individuality in terms of like being your own person. I mean, don't get me wrong, all the way through from, obviously the classic, you have to wear a school uniform and things like that at a base level, all the way through to, like I said, when you go into a music class being like, hey, I am listening at the, and like, and the guitar teacher loves the music that I'm talking about. I go and I'm like, hey, I've been listening to some Jimi Hendrix or some Led Zeppelin or, some Bob Dylan or whatever. And I would love to like work towards learning some of their songs. I'd love to learn some Chili's music or something like that. And the response that I got was, no, you have to follow the syllabus, which is cool. We're going to work on your basic chord structures. We're going to learn your scales. And it's like, cool.
It kills.
I don't want to learn classical guitar.
Right.
Like, so it kills the creativity. And I think your point of doing it outside of school is a big one that I think everyone kind of does sort of. And interestingly for me, skateboarding has been the only main consistent in my life, as in, I started when I was 8 years old and I'm still doing it now, but there was a period when I was at boarding school where I stopped doing it as much, to the point where it would only happen when I would come home to you guys, because at school there was nowhere to do it. I had to wear a helmet if I even stepped on a board. Like there was like, it was just stupid. So the shunning of individuality, I think, is a big problem within schools.
Yeah, I mean, so the thing to bear in mind with school systems, and that's a big conversation in of itself. Schools aren't there to help you grow as an individual or even as a person. They are there ultimately to give you a basic set of skills that politicians decide that you need to grow up and be profitable in a modern economy. And they fail at that because there's no way that the school infrastructure or even the political infrastructure are capable of growing at the same pace as technology. So as an example, when I started doing photography at A level, we had digital cameras, but they weren't like amazing. My parents went and bought me a Nikon D50, and that's what I ended up using. But the school digital cameras were terrible. So you still do the old classics like the wet photography, and that's a skill that you should need and have. And if you want to do photography, you don't own a wet camera, or if you don't try a wet camera, get one. But like the digital manipulation stuff was very, very new. So all of that kind of stuff that I did was off my own back. I wasn't even using Photoshop at that point. The school basically had a really basic Flash, because Flash was still around back then. Thing that I would do my editing in and then use that. And when I submitted those images to my teacher, he'd be like, "This is great, and we have to do a module on digital photography because it's kind of growing. But if you submit work like this for your A level, you won't pass because the examiners don't want to see this. They're not interested in this." And so if you take that to, because you're a bit younger than I am as well, like if music technology, like you have new softwares, new programs, new plugins coming out frequently that the infrastructure of the school just can't keep up with. And politicians aren't even fucking aware of them, and they write the syllabus. So what hope does someone have? Yeah, it's a really, really big one. But like they even fall down when it comes to things like poetry. So poetry is going through a ringer at the moment. So when I did poetry at school, this is going back a long time, but when I did it, we had teachers that were like, okay, we need to learn Shakespeare for this part of the syllabus. We need to go and read some Yeats for this part of the syllabus. And you go and read those things and study those things. I was very lucky at an early age to have a teacher called Mr. Smith, who I've tried to find since, but that name is surprisingly common.
There's one at every school across the country.
I was going to say, and a Brad Pitt movie comes up as well.
Right? Exactly. But we read just stuff that wasn't syllabus in his class. And it was really, really useful because he was like, you read stuff that was inspiring and good and you related to, and then you'd be like, okay, we're going to study the building blocks for what poetry is now. This is a rhyming couplet. This is what a meter is. This is how you use that, but break it so it's different, and all those kinds of things that you do as a professional poet. I got taught quite young. And so outside of class, I was like, this is really fun. I'm going to do more of this. It wasn't very good, but you did it. And then when you get told now we've got to read Shakespeare, this is how it was done really well in the past, you kind of like, oh, okay, I might give it some time of day, and still don't like Shakespeare, but you had more of a respect for it. So yeah, like you almost kind of need teachers that go off syllabus to inspire children, and you can't churn those out. They are not something that you can invest money into having. They are good by virtue of the fact they break the mold, and if everyone broke the mold, there wouldn't be a mold to break.
It's
a really good point. It's a bit of a like dichotomy situation, it's a bit of an oxymoron going around. And
yeah,
but do you know what's, I think you're so right, Sven, and you talk about that, and if you look at my track life, it's hilarious. I had loads of things. I was the sportiest kid growing up. I did every single sport that was available to me. And interestingly, then going from high school to British college, not university, but the 2 years at the end of high school, I transitioned to performing arts. Don't get me wrong, still very physical, lots of dance, lots of like breathing work with singing and like so on and so forth.
I've tried doing pliés and they're bloody hard.
Yeah, it's bloody hard. And so, but the weird thing was, the only reason that happened is because my literary support teacher, who happened to be the film studies teacher, the drama teacher, and also did like a literary support class for kids who struggled with English. And he was my literary support teacher, and we would have one-to-one sessions, me and him. And he would teach me like amazing things about writing. Like instead of writing like basic essays, I would learn how to write campaigns for Dungeons and Dragons. I would learn how to write short stories, and
haiku,
like exactly like poetry. Like I did a bunch of poetry with him, and at the end of all of that, even though I wasn't even doing drama with him, I came away going, Mr. Bridger has made me do drama. And I actually ended up doing the school play with him at the end in my last year, which was like, again, a massive break because I was the sports kid, and I like jumped over to drama, which was super fun. And then after that, I was like, yep, Mr. Bridger all the way. And I think without him, I wouldn't have done it.
It's interesting. I think probably generalizing, but most people can reach back in their memory to schooling and have both sides, right? Can have someone that really, really inspired them to learn in a way that they like. When you really want to learn, when you want to go home and investigate and spend more time on something, that's a whole different version of learning than just completing an assignment, right?
Yeah.
So if there's a teacher that can tap into that, that's the magic. So we all tend to have someone that really sort of connected that up for us for whatever subject that was. But I also have many teachers that killed things that I actually liked. Like I did want to learn how to play music as well. And it was the same thing. Like we were doing orchestral stuff and like bands, just stuff that I wasn't interested in. And after a while, it was just, you dreaded it. And so, yeah, there's something about that whole early stage experience that can mold the rest of your life, right? It can actually take you away from a path that you might be really, really good at, yet it's been killed out of you. That's too bad.
I know exactly what you mean. I had an English teacher for when I was in year 10, and I I was in this. So I don't know if you know much about the English school system, but like you've got everything's tiered.
Yeah.
You've got like your best class, and then you've
Top
got the
tier.
one of that, and then
Yeah.
and then substantially shitter as you go down. I was in. I was in technically the second to top class for English, but like there was another class that was for special kids, classics and stuff. They did all the kind of stuff, but yeah, the highest grade I could achieve in that group, because they'd make me sit the exam paper that meant I could only get that grade, was a B.
Yeah.
And I was consistently achieving a B, so I went to my English teacher and was like, I want to be moved out of this class and into the class that's the next one up, because I feel that I'm proving that I can do the work. And to be honest, in this class, I'm being bullied for giving right answers all the time. Like I have no drive to achieve in this class at all. And she turned around and was like, I'm not going to move you into the next class up because you're keeping this class's grades up.
Right, you're lifting the entire class up. You're doing my
what
job
a
for me.
fucking bullshit ass reason. That is some
You're inspiring the kids
Jesus
that I'm
Christ.
supposed to be inspiring.
Yeah.
So yeah.
What she, yeah, and I wasn't. I was inspiring them to give me bloody noses after class. That was all I got out of that situation. It was fucking terrible. But I can't remember her name, but she's definitely still getting a dedication when the book comes out.
that's great, dude. I love that, dude. It's like do you know what's hilarious? I look back on this, and as a kid, I loved this line. You know, in Biggie Smalls, I can't remember which song it is. I think it's oh god, I can't remember which song it is. That's gonna absolutely come to bite me in the ass as well. But you start the song with this is to all the teachers who told me I never amount to nothing. And you're like, oh, as a kid, I was like, yeah, fuck the teachers. And then as I grew up, I was like, wait, Biggie, you're so good at rapping and your lyrics are incredible. But that's a double negative. That makes no fucking sense, dude. I was like, that made no fucking sense, brother. Like, you need to sort out that line.
Yeah, man. And so like that's a really good point as well. Like outside of poetry in class, like I was a metalhead growing up, so I listened to a lot of Rammstein, Machine Head, Mastodon, Machine, like really aggressive, angry music. But there was a field trip that I went to to Florence, and the guy sat next to me on the plane over, a guy called Jag, was like, we shared his iPod, and it was all hip hop, and I was like, what the is this? This is great. And I got into hip hop then probably about, I must have been in year 11, so, or maybe year 12, like, early sixth form. And was shown this new style of music where people were like talking and not sort of like gangster rap. I'm still not massively keen on gangster rap. I can listen to it, I like it, but you get a new wave of American hip hop and even British hip hop where the lyrics are very, very intelligent. People like Aesop Rock and Atmosphere and Slug and all those kinds of musicians and hip hop artists. I was listening to those, and the way that they use language is incredible. And I don't know why his kids aren't looking at like Aesop Rock and being like, oh, okay, there's a lot of words there I don't know what mean. Made them all rhyme. And that kind of stuff. And like to the point where when I went to university, I ended up being the president of the Hip Hop Society, and it was like such a quick change around. It was
I did not know that about you, dude. That's fucking sick, bro.
yeah, it was really weird. I was president of my college, so I was involved in all the campus politics. I was a resident DJ for the Rock Sock, and then I was president of the Hip Hop Society. It's a bit of a weird story how that happened. I didn't get voted in or anything. The last president of the Hip Hop Society had to leave campus because he got busted for drugs on campus.
I mean, as the hip hop president would. Yeah, I thought you were gonna be like, you got shot in a drive-by or something like that.
Yeah, and then I was like, I ran
shot 9 times, once in the face.
Yeah. But that was really, really fun. Like I'm still, again, like I was a terrible DJ the whole way through. Like going from listening to metal and DJ metal, where you don't, there's no such thing as beat matching when your music's like that aggressive. You just go stop play.
Yeah.
And then like being in front of people who are expecting you to actually scratch and shit. I was like, it's a laptop, mate. I don't know how.
You're like, this thing open and closes. Look at it go, guys.
I play it like a bellows, right? It's an accordion.
Yeah, it's like a bloody accordion.
So how much did that inform or inspire you going into spoken word?
Massively. Yeah. I probably relate as an artist now more to hip hop artists than I do to the poets of yore. Although I just use a word like "your."
Yeah.
But they are more inspiring. And so when I first started writing poetry, I was trying to be seen to be clever, and not even being clever, just to be seen to be clever. So I'd include really oblique references and just wanky, like circle jerk kind of, you and a few people in the audience get it. I don't know how to mime that. Let's put those dicks down.
Put those imaginary dicks away. One second.
Everywhere. Just to be seen to be clever, and so people could realize how smart I was. And it wasn't it wasn't gratifying to myself really deep down, and it wasn't to help the audience. And everything changed kind of instantaneously. I heard a guy called Polar Bear. Polar Bear is kind of a rapper, kind of poetry. A guy he's a Brummie, Birmingham. And I heard him do a piece called Jessica, and it's all about just growing up with this girl and the relationship. And there was no verbosity, there were no long words, there was no like extended rhyme schemes and all that kind of stuff you expect in highfalutin poetry. And he did the inverse. So when I started writing poetry, I take really, really simple concepts and make them oblique and complex to be seen to be clever. And he did the exact opposite. He took really, really complex experiences that we all go through and we all feel and we have resonance to, and then made it simple so that if you heard it, you'd be like, fuck, I know exactly what that guy is saying. And I know exactly how that feels. And yeah, it changed. Like overnight, I was like, fuck this old shit I was doing. And yeah, when you start doing that as well, you free yourself up to write in a more exciting and engaging way. You can use language differently instead of like following weird rhyme schemes just for the sake of doing it. It's an ongoing conversation. So beat poetry in America, sort of 60s-ish, I want to say.
Ginsberg and that whole the beat poets
exactly.
up in Haight-Ashbury and all that.
Yeah. So they were all about writing free-form poetry. They didn't want constraints, and they often practiced automatic writing, all that kind of stuff, because they were all about the concept of writing unrestrained and being free, because freedom. Right. And then off the back of that era, a group of French mathematicians, physicists, and poets called the Oulipo formed. And they're great. Look them up. Their entire thing was coming up with ever more constrained forms of writing. So their idea being that the more you're concentrating on how you're writing something, the more the brain's firing of itself back here. And what you end up writing, you're not thinking about it. Therefore, that's actually ultimate freedom. It's coming from somewhere other than yourself. So like really wanky metaphysical stuff, but like really, really interesting as well. So they like the best example, the one that every poet seems to know, is something called a univocalism, where you only use one vowel. So you can write, I think I don't know, there's a book that is a univocalism and it's hundreds of pages long and they use one vowel. And it's crazy. Yeah. And I struggle to write a fucking paragraph half side of A4 doing univocalisms. But to bring it back, like the poetry that I now kind of write and have written since, is you have a big sort of emotional thing that you kind of want to say, you want to tell a story, and that's ultimately what it is. It's storytelling, because people engage with a story, a character, a progression, than they do sort of, I'm going to reference Sisyphus in this poem because I can, I'm a poet. There's an old saying in poetry that most people ignore poetry because poetry ignores most people.
Okay.
And that every time I write now, I'm like, yep, cool. That was really wanking. I did it for myself. Let's kill that line and come up with something different.
Dude, is that a lead-in for us? Can you share something?
Yeah, I absolutely
That would be amazing. Before we do that, can you just give us a little bit of context on your resume, because it's pretty substantial. Like
that's a really good point. I was about. Do you know, that's so funny. You took the words right out of my mouth. I was about to say that as well.
Yeah. So just give us a sort of an overview of what you've done with, and I'm not even sure the terminology, but spoken word competitions and representation of, all sorts of stuff. And then it'd be great to hear something.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of it's going to be a long introduction though, because it's like it leads into how I got into sort of spoken word poetry in and of itself. So when I was at university, I joined the Creative Writing Society, and left quickly because I thought I was great and I wasn't, and people were mean about my poetry, so I was like, yeah, and left. But when I was working at a pub in Bromley years later, my boss went on holiday a couple of times, and then when he came back, I was like, well, I want to go on poetry. I want to go and do some poetry for a couple of weeks. I want some time off. And he just turned it down. And I was like, fuck this guy. And literally, pulled my pinafore off and threw it in his face and stormed out, and then realized I didn't have a job.
Retrospectively.
Yeah, not smart. On Facebook straight away, like, need a job, shit, son. And the old president of the Creative Writing Society at Kent, a guy called Dan Simpson, who is now a very accomplished poet and a very lovely, amiable human being, got in touch and was like, well, there's poetry competition that I'm running in Canterbury, or I'm part of in Canterbury. You should come and enter. It's performance poetry, stand on stage and do a slam. And then if you win, you go through to be part of a project where they go into schools and youth groups and teach performance poetry. And I was like, fuck, I'll give it a go. I've never really performed poetry. I fancy myself as being someone on stage and important in the spotlight, but yeah, all right, I'll do it. And did it. Did a poem called Career Advice, and ended up doing really well and being part of that project. So that was a really, really big moment. So going into teaching children and hearing what they've got to say about poetry, like there was one guy I will stick in my head forever who was like, fuck poetry, I'm just going to sit here and write Enter Shikari lyrics. And I was like, dude, you absolutely should. Ralph Reynolds is an amazing poet. I've got a book of his poetry. I'll go get it. Yeah, like wherever you draw inspiration from, fucking go for it. But it was really, really rewarding to hear what these people were saying, because they all come from different age groups. Like there were young kids who are like, I don't care what people think because I'm just happy to be discovering something new every day. And then you've got people who have discovered the concept of cool, and are much more closed off and like don't want to appear too friendly with the teachers to their friends and stuff like that. And then, yeah, off the back of that, got some more work going into schools and teaching poetry and youth groups, and that was really rewarding. About that time, I started, because I'd never been in a slam before, started entering slams. And slam poetry, for anyone who doesn't know, is just competitive poetry. You stand on stage, you do a poem in 3 minutes, and people make up points, because the points don't really fucking matter. It's just to draw the audience in. Like, if an audience can partake of something, then they're more engaged.
I'm picturing the 8 Mile scene of just the rap battle. So is it similar to like a rap battle type thing where the audience, the consensus, you win if you win more of the audience?
Yeah, I mean, it can be. So some slams, you'll have a panel of judges. They'll be they might be professionals. They might be selected out of the audience. They'll hold up signs, or you might go to the clapometer.
Yeah.
The audience will be really engaged. Yeah, it depends. And like
Classic clapometer.
It's like I prefer that kind of stuff. It's less metric. It's less real than a score from a poet. But then they're fake as well, because that's how they felt the day. They might have had a bad cheese sandwich at lunch and you mentioned cheese and like, fuck that guy.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. But like the clapometer, at least you're engaging with the audience and you know what you're writing for them.
Yeah.
So that's a slam, and it can be as like bawdy as 8 Mile. It can be inspired by rap battles and that kind of thing, or it can be a bunch of genteels going, "Yes, well done, thank you." It varies greatly, but yeah. So I started entering slams and winning some slams, and I was the host of the Maidstone Fringe Festival, their poetry stage, and all that kind of stuff. And then I moved to Bristol, and Bristol poetry scene is a big deal.
Really?
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Oh wow, did not know.
Yeah, a lot of the national slam champions have come from Bristol. A lot of people move here for poetry, or they get into poetry while they're here. And I didn't know that. But I started going to slams like Milk, which is a nice local slam. It's all about getting people involved in it for the first time and kind of inspiring them to carry on. And you've got events like Raise the Bar, which is much bigger. They get international poets in and stuff like that. So, but I entered an event here called Hammer and Tongue, and Hammer and Tongue is a national event. So they have regional heats all up and down the country. and then the regional winners go through to London and perform at the Albert Hall, and then there is a winner who is the national champion for that year. And in 2016, I was the Bristol champion. I ended up winning that and going through to the national final. And I got through to like the second to last round and lost to a friend of mine who I've known for ages, who I've always lost to. So I'm kind of like, but also kind of like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's one of those. So yeah, the national final, I've shared stages with people like Buddy Wakefield and Shane Coixon, who are big names in the world of poetry. I was mentored by Dan Simpson, Joel Taylor, Michael James Parker, again, big deals in the world of poetry. I've supported Neil Hilborn, who's a big like founding father of the button poetry scene in America. So that was a huge deal. That was insane. And yeah, lots of stuff.
Amazing.
Yeah, big career.
I have a question for you because I'm actually a Koizakan fan. I'll call myself. How was it sharing the stage with him? I've heard his presence is pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, well, he's a lovely guy, man.
Yeah.
So I've met him a couple of times now, and like when I first met him, I was in Canterbury in a poetry thing in Canterbury, performing at a festival, and I got off stage doing a thing, and he was just kind of hovering, and I was like, "That's fucking Shane." and went over and introduced myself, and like by the very virtue of you being in the presence of someone like Shane, who is extremely good,
Yeah.
you're kind of like, yeah. So it was really intimidating, but he's a really nice guy. I've had lots of friendly conversations with Shane. Like I shared when he was in Bristol, we were here, we met him at the thing he was staying. We drove all the way to Bath for an event in Bath, and just shared a car ride and had a friendly chat, and then went for a beer on the waterfront. And like, it is weird, like sharing a stage with him, because you are constantly like, a really big deal right now is seeing my poetry, and the anxiety is there, and it's more so than it might normally be. But actually, he kind of alleviates it by being himself.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. No, that's dope, dude. I was gonna say he's a badass. I listened to one of his like albums actually through school. Actually, I discovered him when I was at school actually, and I really enjoyed his stuff. But yeah, he's an absolute badass. His metaphors I found were so strong. I think one of his lines was "Do my socks smell like shit? Because I've been kicking ass all day." And you're like, that's a bloody good line. Like that's a fucking great, like, and that's literally just off the top of my head. That's like remembering like 7 years ago. But yeah, I remember his vocabulary and the way he like worked through it was just amazing. And again, I watched some of his live stuff and just the presence that, that's a big part of it. We actually talked to a band that we had on recently, the China Bears, and a big thing we talked about was performance and like how, being animated on stage and having a presence is really important. I think his is very almost like stoic, I would say. Like there's almost like this air of like, holy shit.
It's like he can hold the space.
Yeah, exactly. He doesn't need to do much at all.
Yeah.
This is the thing with performance poetry, like the words and the delivery and stuff are hugely important, but like even the fucking way you stand on stage factors into how people receive the information you're giving them. And I think the most important takeaway with it is genuine, like just being genuine. So like there are poets that I know that are anxious and shuffle on stage, and because that is who they are, they do it really well, and it comes across really well. There are poets that I know that have they stand there and they are stoic and they deliver things that way, and it comes across well. You've got poets like Kate Tempest, who is quite introverted as a person, and when she's on stage, that nervous energy comes across. And then you've got people like Disraeli, who I think is supremely confident, and again that comes across. If you watch, I've watched Disraeli like 3 times in one day because again festival situation, and like he's so prepared and so on the ball that even the banter between the poems is the same. Like it's that level of stuff. So like it's just being genuine. There's room for all kinds of performances in the world of poetry.
That's You know, I think that's it's a big one, you know, is just that like that's the other thing that I always find is people when they're talking about, you know, a certain thing, like I've met people and they go, I don't like music. And I go, wait, what? Like you don't like anything? Like you don't like any sort of like nice reverberation in your ear? Like nothing? And they're like, no, yeah, I'm just not a music person. I'm like, to me, it's interesting that through these all these creative arts, people will label it as, you know, oh, I don't like music because I've heard this stuff and thus I don't like it. And you know, for example, my grandma's here at the moment visiting us, and I talked to her recently, and she was like, you know, I listen to, you know, a bit of this and a bit of that, and she's a bit all over the place with her music taste, but she's like, but my friends, they just listen to classical music. They refuse to listen to anything else. They're like, it's terrible. And it's like, if you don't try things, if you don't like dip into things and like, and especially like you said with poetry, you can't go, oh, poetry is, you know, terrible because you've heard like one haiku that was shit, or you've, you know,
You
or
don't like Shakespeare.
I was gonna say, are you and you know what, Shakespeare is so broadly fucking poetry at this point. Like you can barely call Shakespeare like poetry. He's like he uses iambic pentameter, but it's so far from like can poet. Like he's there basically doing a script. It just happened that it had to be old timey in the way that he fucking wrote it. If he was around today, I'm sure there'd be yeets and like f bombs left, right, and center. You know, like it's like
For a second, I thought you'd mispronounce Yates. Sorry.
but yeah, I don't know.
Shakespeare's a really interesting one because when I don't like Shakespeare, I'm not a
Hmm.
big fan, and people who are watching this and part of the poetry scene might not like the fact I've said that. Some might, I don't know. But he was really really important. Like I think when you look back at something like Shakespeare with today's lens, it is dated and outmoded and obscured by the very fact that the language is old world language.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was fresh and new, and there were lots of dirty jokes hidden in it, in public, performed. How dare you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Really important stuff. But yeah, like I'm not a fan.
It's a good point.
Do you know what's interesting as well? Like, because as in school I studied Shakespeare just in English, and then as an actor, you just have to do a module on Shakespeare. It's just you don't go through any sort of acting without doing Shakespeare, and um, the respect. I think that's one of the big things that like from all these old timey practitioners, you talk about anyone in any avenue of creativity, anyone who is one of the OG pioneers of a lot of these things, you can go, you know, I really respect what you do. It may not be what it is today, but man, looking back, like you said, when Shakespeare was writing it, like some of like, oh, like just some of the stuff in Much Ado About Nothing, for example, is so like some of the like interplay with comedy is so much more intelligent than the comedy that's being written today for movies. And it's like that kind of stuff I really respect and I really appreciate what he did in that way, especially from an acting point of view in terms of if you get it right. And the beautiful thing, like you said, is there's so many different versions. You look at, you know, a classic one where, you know, what's his name? Kenneth Branagh did Much Ado About Nothing. Completely different to David Tennant and Catherine Tate, who did it, you know, 15 years later, and it's set in the 80s, and it's like all banter, and you know, it's a lot more modern. And so I think it's really really hard to not appreciate the old pioneers, but also I agree with you that all those people that are like it's Shakespeare or nothing. You're like, have you heard any of the new stuff? Like, have you listened to anything new?
I'd take Shakespeare's worst tragedy over something like Mrs. Brown's Boys every single day of the week.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll tell you what though, your point was really good that I've never really thought about in that way, which is he was probably blowing minds with the way he was writing stuff back then,
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
So like what's the comparable? I don't know, like in the music industry when you know when Kanye stepped onto the scene, you know, whatever 15 years ago with his music production and just tied it all together in a way that no one really had done to that level. It was just like a step level change that took it to a new level.
This is probably the first and only time legitimately that Shakespeare and Kanye have been in the same.
Yeah, compared ever. That's not a bad point.
First
at
and
all.
last.
I thought you were gonna go with like, you know, yeah, Chuck Berry bringing rock and roll from
Yeah,
the
that's a
blacks
good
to
one.
the whites. You know, like I was expecting like something like that, but no, just Kanye West. You know.
Yeah, perhaps not the best example, but you get what you get what I mean though. Like, and I can picture, because we're still like reading Shakespeare, so that step level was massive. Like it literally was probably blowing people's heads off. Just the complexity of it, the skill, the cleverness was probably pretty amazing.
There is a line you could draw from Shakespeare through to Kanye.
It might not be straight.
That's going to track all the people that literarily and musically blew minds throughout the ages. And you have Iron Maiden and Pink Floyd on there, and it's going to be an impressive line. But yeah, he was probably unheard of and new and crazy.
Yeah, and do you know what is as well with Shakespeare as well? I think something else that really is beautiful about him these days. These days you don't get this because when there's a celebrity, cameras absorb their lives. With Shakespeare, there's so much secrecy and shit shrouded in mystery about him. You know, there's even rumors that Shakespeare was a woman. There's rumors that Shakespeare was gay. There's rumors that, you know,
it wasn't even Shakespeare. There was this other person.
There was two people that were actually Shakespeare. One of them was the person in public, and the other one wrote it all in private. You know, there's all these different crazy stories, and I think it's interesting. And with the whole Kanye comparison, do you know what's funky is in terms of, and I said this to Tracy because actually my mum made us some crazy weird dinner contraption tonight because we're doing this later. So she made us something crazy that she came up with at like 5 in the morning last night while she was sleeping. And people who are in that weird genius, like when you reach a certain level of skill within an art, you get a little bit crazy and a little bit weird and a little bit interesting. And I think, you know, there's rumors in Shakespeare's life that existed and then if you compare that to Kanye, the dude, like it's a very real
we don't
thing.
Need rumors. We can actually go on YouTube and see like lots and lots of minutes of it actually right in front of us.
Exactly. You want to see him cry or you want to see him shout? What you like? What are you feeling today? No, I think it's really interesting in terms of the pioneers through time. But yeah, you know, we'll wrap it back around. Tooks, drop us a beat, dude. Give us a little bit of some slam.
I was gonna start beatboxing then, and then realized no.
You know how just before you start, you know how you were talking about this. You know how the rappers, when they're like dropping a beat, and they're waiting to jump in, and they're like,
yo, oh yeah, can you just turn the beat up in my headphones? Okay, 1, 2. Here we go. Here we go. To my ladies. Oh, okay, wait, 1 sec. Let me start again. You're like, what the fuck is going on?
Let's go.
Doesn't exist in poetry because you can't have someone like hype man be like, oh, yo, and then you're like, shall I compare thee to a summer's day?
Do you imagine the hype man? What would the hype man for poetry look like?
It would look like Chaucer from A Knight's Tale.
Yeah. Oh, great reference. Bloody great reference. Oh my God. Have you seen A Knight's Tale with Heath Ledger?
Oh, I think I saw it. Yeah.
Oh, dude, that was a fucking strong ass reference, dude. I cannot believe how strong of a reference that was. That was amazing. Yes, dude. He is exactly what poets need.
Yeah.
All right.
Alan Tudyk did that all great. So this is a poem called Old Street, New Town, and I wrote about growing up. So we were tykes riding bikes on our childhood estates, constantly plotting to run from home and escape, but who are we kidding? We had everything. A picture perfect painting of Middle England, of bulldogs and terriers terrorizing pedestrians, or a muddle of muddy clothes in the throes of a play fight, or a whirling dervish immersed in a skirmish in earnest. It was perfect, like a first kiss. I remember mine was with Harriet at the school disco. My parents thought it was the cutest, and I was 10 then, oblivious to my innocence. Back when a true connection took mere seconds, we weren't fickle. All it took was a bag of Pogs, some Pokemon cards, and a bicycle. We would ride those roads to a call to our homes, and were doled our tea and told to go play till the daylight went away. We were 9/10 innocence, and the rest was Grey's knees. It was all we could perceive that these days would never cease, and when our parents told us to be gone before we knew it, you could have skewered the disbelief. But they weren't wrong. They never were. Well, not back then anyway. So 5 years on, and I was never part of passing footballs in the park, more for drinking red wine in graveyards till way past dark. Me and the whole crew probably wearing more black than we were supposed to. We were smoke in a storm cloud, either being too loud or hidden in shrouds, and yes, we thought we were pretty cool. On school nights, we'd meet outside BK, then make a nuisance of ourselves till the police came. I remember Annika, face paint, running in the rain while she was running to the same from a copper trying to stop her from playing her favourite game of bothering the Christians preaching on the corner, but they never caught her. She was always faster than the disorder in her wake. These were our first tastes of alcohol and rebellion. Maidstone's little hellions, skipping school because it was never kind to us, but it wasn't in a classroom that we learned what a friend was. See, friends were forever, or until they lost track of each other. I've searched for Annika everywhere, but your guess is as good as mine as to what happened to her. So 5 years on, again, and we were nightlife then, using student debts to find new friends, drowning sorrows that hadn't happened yet, like we were hedging our bets on a future bereft and doing our best to arrest the dawn as it crept in, but it was more than the morning. We're stalling, really. We were holding back on the question marks in our spines that time bent in as it flung us in unexpected directions. We invented the answers by imbibing harder of Dutch courage beer jackets that made us bolder. This is how we found out who we were in the purr of the pub and the slur of the party. Me and Luke Carey, we were 9/10 sarcasm and the rest was running on empty. When we walked home on kebab meat streets with after party offal under our feet, there were sunsets in our peace. Like when Luke got leukemia and the streets got amnesia. But I swear, life wasn't supposed to be a goodbye. More like a bike ride full of near misses and first kisses. So hello, friends I haven't met yet. My bike is parked outside and I will race you to the fork in the road. Just promise me that you'll take it slow. There you go, poem.
Dude.
Boom. So you go first. I've heard that before, and I've got to say that's your best rendition that I've heard, Sven. But Tom, give me your reaction because you've never heard Sven throw some lines out there. I want to hear it.
Sven, so let me pretext this by saying I purposely didn't watch any of your stuff because I wanted to hear it live and just see what like the experience was, and I didn't know which one you were going to do, so I didn't want to hear it a second time, and then had to sort of conjure something. Dude, what I loved about it is what you said. Is the essence of well, I forget what the person before you was it Kozakan? Yeah, so bringing a very complex and emotional story into it was a visual thing for me, and I really loved the journey that you took us on of just innocence through adolescence and seeing that things weren't exactly perfect, and then through real tribulation, and then redemption at the end of like, look, I understand what the the graveyard and the carnage behind me is, and I need to make the best of this going forward, and I'm looking forward to that. Amazing, dude. Thank you for sharing that. That was really great.
Yeah, I'll second it too. That one is insane because, like you said, like I'll echo what Tom said in terms of relatableness. Like, just one line that you said was like, parents were always right, or at least they were back then. And it's like, that's something that everyone gets. Everyone gets that. And I think so many motifs of what you just talked about are really beautiful. And actually, it made me think of a song that another friend of mine who does like music wrote himself, and it's again about growing up, scraping your knees, climbing trees, that kind of shit. And it's something that, like you said, we all go through. And I think the most beautiful part actually of that for me, other than being super relatable, is actually your use of rhyme in a very sexy way. In that in that you do it very differently to here's what I would line it up with. I've seen one interview with Eminem, and I love this interview because it's absolutely hilarious. And someone's like, tell us about how you rhyme. And he's like, well, I take normal words that have normal syllables and I turn it into something different. And and the dude's like, so give us an idea of something. And he's like, well, people say you can't rhyme with orange, but I'm like, well, door hinge and porridge, and like you say it a bit different, and boom, it's there. And I think you encapsulated a lot of that in that of doing this rhyming, but you're using not even close to the same endings of words or the same ending syllable on things. Actually, it's in some cases a completely different thing, but that you've said in a really beautiful way. Also, dude, just as someone who's a performer, the way you perform that, and we're on a fucking Zoom call, was was damn impressive, dude. I love, and I also, going back to referencing, like we said earlier, putting on a performance, your levels of, it really brings people in when you're like talking low, talking happy, smiling, and then when it gets intense, raising the voice, being, powerful. You like,
yeah.
Dude, it's fucking high level shit. That's
I love it. It was great, man. I think for me also just I started getting swept away in the words, and then at some point I was like, oh shit, yeah, he's also rhyming this. You know what I mean? And that hopefully that's the compliment that I'm intending it to be. Yeah. Which is, it's a poem, right?
But it's a story.
Yeah, but you swept me up in the story, and then along the way, oh yeah, and he is also executing this shit all the way through this. So, yeah. Thanks for sharing that, man.
You're very, very welcome, and thank you for having me on to share it. But the two things that you pick up, Bodhi, are two things that I've kind of deliberately spent a lot of time crafting. The amount of times I've been to a poetry event, and there's been someone, there was a cat, it sat on a mat, it was wearing a hat, its name was Pat, and it's really dull. And it's like to the point where me and some friends, it sounds malicious, and it probably was, but you'd sit at the back and be like, when you knew a rhyme was coming, you'd be like, ah, and then tell your friend the rhyme. And and it was just sort of like our sort of rebellious way.
We may have just lost Sven, guys.
But it's really performing it. There are two things you can do. Yeah, sorry. When you start performing, there are two things you can do to really, really perform. And the first, the obvious one is starting with that performance. If you deliver everything monotone the entire way through, your audience is going to turn off, and this is really boring to listen to.
Yeah.
So when you perform it, you craft the performance in a way that you are taking people through peaks and troughs and a journey and like a roller coaster. You want to if you have a poem that's really sad the entire way through, it might not be boring, it might just be sad the entire way through. Your audience is going to feel sad the entire way through, and that's kind of cheap. But if you say like an angry one or a love poem, and there are peaks and troughs and all this kind of interesting stuff going on, they're going to pay attention more, and it's more true of life. You have moments, you can suffer from depression, or you can be a really happy person, and then one day something will happen that will just remind you that it goes the other way as well. And when you're writing it to craft that as well, so rhyme schemes can be, and I almost detest rhyme schemes. Because they become obvious and tried out and boring. So you can hide rhymes in various different ways. So you can, if you have an A-B rhyme scheme where word one rhymes, this one doesn't rhyme, this one rhymes with that one, this one rhymes with the second one, you can hide those rhymes in the middle of sentences as opposed to the sentence end, so it feels like it flows differently. Just playing with the meter of it as well. And then you can use half rhyme or feminine rhyme or vowel rhyme, where you're making different bits of the word rhyme. So I can have a 3-syllable word over here where the first syllable rhymes with the second syllable of a word down here. And it just tricks that you can hear it because it's performed, but you wouldn't normally sort of see it. So it's really tricksy, and it took me a while to learn to do, but I did. And it also came with the fact that I realized that I really ultimately can't write really strict metered rhyme, because you get to a point where I've run out of words.
What rhymes with
God damn it, rain, drain, pain, T-pain, fuck it.
But it's also made it really, really tricky to put it to music. So I've done a few projects now. I've got a band as well, and we're going back and putting it to music. And like some of the music has to be really off meter and kind of ethereal to make it work, because you'll be in a strict kind of like 4/4 up here, and then all of a sudden down here just talking shit.
Yeah.
And the producer's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
One of the first poetry events I did was something called the Right Angle in Petersfield, and it was like really, it was the Gentiles poets mecca. Like lots of octogenarians sat around and reading poems they'd written, sat in their conservatory about a sparrow that flew past, and like that kind of well-to-do area. And when I first went, there was a guy with a double bass. It's like in the background, and he was playing throughout other people's poems. And when I got up within like half a stanza, he was like, "Mission achieved."
We'll leave that one there. Yeah, I think, dude, yeah, it's impressive. Like the other thing is, it's amazing as well, dude. I again, I hope you appreciate what I mean by this, but you're such a like interesting and bubbly person, and the way that you communicate is very like bippity bappity, and you're like very like, you know, awesome in that way. But then when you do your poetry, dude, it's a whole nother person. It's a different human being that suddenly comes out. You're a whole nother like mech that is like here to cause some damage, dude. Like you like the Terminator Sven suddenly appears and is like suddenly very professional, very, you know, serious. And even though, like, again, I know that, you know, you're sat there smiling and, you know, in the first bit, you know, you're talking about being young and giving it some, I know that you're also being real serious because you're, you know, working through the performance and whatnot. So I think also, dude, it's such a testament to you as a person, going from who you are in your interactions to then your performance version. And dude, it's fucking amazing. Like you're such an incredible performer, like really, really good. I also, just so you know, dude, while this has been going on, we just got a comment saying that was amazing and so poignant, dude. Who's someone from someone who's listening right now.
Amazing. That's really cool.
Yeah. So
Thank
let me
you
ask you. Let me ask you something. With regard to art, so when you started out this hour and a half or a bit ago, you talked about you're on your own journey. And along the way on your journey, your art has come with you, right? And so were you of that mindset that I certainly was when I was, so in my 20s, I was trying to be an actor, and I had I sort of fit into the group that thought to be an actor meant you had to be tortured in some way, right? You had, right? Like I don't mean like physically tortured, but I mean,
well, I know
you know,
exactly what you mean.
That reaction was severely appropriate. Like I fully agree with that, Sven.
But what I mean is, like, so in the poetry world, you had to be Arthur Rimbaud, right? You had to be drowning in a puddle of excess on a sidewalk in Paris, right? And really kind of looking at the bottom from below almost, right? And then really kind of pulling in all of those experiences to really get to the raw aspect of true art, right?
Yeah.
And then, right? And then once you get out of that, you know, to some degree you can look, because you're now having a retrospective look. You've had enough time away from that you can retrospectively look at the points in time where you were in that space.
Yeah.
Give us some thoughts on that whole process for you.
Fuck me, where do I start? So yeah, I completely agree, and I definitely used to be the tortured artist. Like there was a point where I was in a dry spell for writing, and I was hanging with some friends in a bar, and I was talking about the dry spell and not being able to write. And like during the space of that conversation with them, I was like, yeah, I need to go home and get drunk and do some drugs, and then I'll be able to write again. And I've definitely, I don't know what kind of audience this goes to, but I've definitely bought drugs with the intention of writing on them.
Yeah.
And all that other shit that I used to do to sort of con myself into going to that place and that state. And I definitely thought, you know, the more miserable I am, the more experiences I have, the more I'll be able to write. I was a horrid person sometimes because of that fucking mentality. And the lies that I told myself during that period as well, like I just thought I was better than everyone for a start. Let's just put that top shelf. But like that I was so inspired all the time that I couldn't sleep because I was writing shit down. And like looking back at it, the stuff that I wrote when I was waking up at 4 a.m. was terrible, and I probably should have just forgot it. There's a Mitch Hedberg joke who he says, as a comedian, I have to think of things that are funny and then write them down. Or if I can't find a pen, I have to convince myself they're not funny.
Yeah.
Like that entire thing was like, yeah, no, I get that. That's me too. And like just going to bed in horrible wasted states and getting drunk to try and fall asleep and torturing myself and pretending that I was more inspired than I was. And like the other lies that come alongside that, like all my best poems I wrote in one go. Just not fucking true. Nowhere near fucking true. And like it's a horrible thought process, because if you tell yourself that, then the next time you go to write, you'll start editing as you're writing, because you'll be like, this isn't as good as that last thing I did, therefore what's the fucking point? Or you won't get it out in one go. And I've had to soberly now remind myself by digging up old first drafts and be like, wow, Old Street New Town was shit when I first wrote it. And that kind of mindset, I think I might have drifted away from the point a little bit, but
No. I think you're no, dude. I think what you're saying is totally right. Like it's a clear, like when you're saying that, a clear, obvious example of that is Hunter S. Thompson. There's the classic photograph of his like routine that's up on the internet, and it's like he wakes up at like 3 a.m. and does like cocaine, LSD, weed, and drinks and smokes all freaking day until 12 o'clock, and then he starts writing after he's been doing that all day. And it's like it's really interesting you say that. And do you know what? I was agreeing with both of you all the way through that until I started thinking about hip hop and rap music these days. And I think something that has really been bothering me is that I enjoyed the 90s boom bap area where everything was about, the gang problems, the coming from hard times, the get into being a rich man and bringing your homies with you and, providing for your family and that kind of shit. And I think a problem that I have with a lot of the rap that I listen to nowadays is like, it's like ice on my neck, I got lean in my bottle, it's like I got honeys in my whip, and you're like, okay. But then the other thing is I was going to say, and this will be a controversial opinion as well. I'm a fan of Logic. He's not someone who often raps about hard times. And he's also not someone who often raps about like I got money, lean, and stuff like that, especially when he's doing his more boom bappy albums. Don't get me wrong, he's done, some mumble rap albums, and he's done a few of the like, more of those ones. But if you look at like especially his first album, Under Pressure, like it's very different. And also his most recent one, No Pressure, the content of it isn't ice and lean and bitches and cars and money. It is a different sense of content that is different and new, but isn't also the old stuff that I like. So I don't know. I'm very conflicted in this argument that we're having right now. I'm so conflicted.
There's people have been talking about this for a long time and probably will carry on talking about it long after we're gone. When I say that, like, when I say all the stuff that I've just said, that is my personal truth. And the lies I told myself to escape my personal truth. I write better when I'm sober. I'm more productive. I'm a better human being. And there are other people that, smoke weed every day, and that's fine for them, like Kevin Smith. Like all that kind of stuff. And so there is that. Different people have different forces enacting on them. But I don't think being tortured is a good place to write from. If you're beating yourself up over what you are doing, then
that's a good point.
That's bad for you. That's bad for your art. That's bad for the people around you. You are abusing everything in that situation just by being that. Like there is a healthier way to find that for you. There has to be. But coming back to what you just said, Scroobius Pip line: guns, bitches, and bling were never part of the four elements and never will be.
Yeah. It's dude. Scroobius Pip is one of the like. Hell yeah, the cross line between poetry and rap, Scroobius Pip dances that like a motherfucker.
Oh yeah.
But here's the reason why we're still talking about this. The dirty little secret for those that have come out the other end, whether they're abstaining from all drugs and alcohol, whatever, is there actually is a little bit of that, that people did tap into some magic, right? And so we look, that's the problem. That is the problem right there, right? So you got people like Jim Morrison or Jimi Hendrix or Janis Joplin or, you know, Amy,
Kurt Cobain.
I mean, you can name a bunch, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And you can't reference, you can't compare, okay, well, how would they have done if they were a little bit more clear-minded or healthy or whatever? You can't make that comparison. All you can do is look at what they produced during those periods of time, and it was pretty amazing. And so now, coming up as a young person, certainly, you can literally buy into that and legitimately and sell yourself on that story. And I think your point, Sven, is really right, and that is like
being tortured.
The torture thing, man, is the bit, right? Like there's nothing, and I would say even like, and anyone that says, well, my art is worth it, that's where you're full of shit, right? That's where you're full of shit.
Yeah.
And so like it is a bit of a tough one to navigate through. And sometimes people use different mind states, different consciousnesses, whether it's through hallucinogenics, tapping into different parts of their brain or whatever, just to see what's going on in there, to unlock some stuff that they just literally can't easily unlock in the state of being that we're in. So it's a complex issue, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like if you could, like, I know Sven, obviously for poetry it might be like a book of poetry, or for art it might be like a collection of art that you do at a specific time. Like I know you did like the cardboard cutout project that you did for ages that was really awesome and really cool that you're putting around Bristol, and like you have like motifs for a period of time. I would almost say, like, almost as an artist, you have to almost dabble in it a little bit, but not enough that you ever like get tortured. And do you know what I mean? Like doing an album, for example, or writing a book, or something like that, where you are involving, maybe something mind expanding psychedelics, for example, and let's talk about things, and people might disagree. They might be like, no drugs, but let's talk about classics. You want to talk about actual classics that are written on drugs? Alice in Wonderland, Lewis Carroll, one of the best ever, studied in schools. Like, this is a book that is literally all based on drugs. The Beatles, every single person who likes the Beatles, you can't like their music if you don't like drugs. Like, there's, like, do you know what I mean? So, to me, I agree with you, Tom. It's a weird balancing act because you don't want the tortured bit, but there's definitely points where, as an artist, you want to access different things.
Yeah.
So your mental health has to come first. And like for people who are at a low point with their mental health, they might not think that's true. They might, the only thing they want to live for is their art, and that will be the thing that they do it for. And I get that. I don't think it's true, but I get it. But something you just touched on was changing topic ever so slightly again. Separating the art from the artist. And you see it all the time in politics. When an artist or an actor or a musician says something political, and you see people go, "Nah, fuck this guy, I'm going to bin all of his stuff," and it happens with conservatives and liberals the same. Not being able to separate the art from the artist, and historically, even more importantly, like Bukowski, one of my favorite poets of all time, massive tosspot, like huge misogynist arsehole. And do I like his art? Yeah. Do I like him as a person? No. Do I think he could have written his art if he was someone else? Probably not. There's this whole cognitive dissonance that you have to wrestle with frequently, where like, I'm going to like this thing but not like this thing about them. Like, imagine a conservative voter, a conservative MP, or even like an American senator who's Tory as shit, who really likes the Beatles, but it has an anti-drug stance as their fucking flag in the sofa.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, but dude, you like the Beatles? I'm like, yeah, I like their music, but I'm anti-drugs. And where are we then able to separate one from the other? And as a politician, are you able to, or can you enjoy someone who enjoys drugs' work because you don't like drugs?
It's a fucking good point. It's a fucking good point.
But I think it's
a really good point.
I think the point is to be realistic about the reality, right? To not take a stance like, I like the Beatles, but I don't like drugs, and have that cognitive dissonance, have a gap in it that you're not willing to compromise your own thinking and say, you know what, there's a bit of a blend that I need to accept.
It's gray. It's not black or white. It's gray.
And that's what we're talking about here, right? We absolutely could have just really bashed drugs and alcohol, and justifiably so. for the sake of mental well-being, and absolutely be justified to do that. But it wouldn't be completely fair to not address the other side as well, right? And to just say, like, there is consideration for how that stuff in controlled moderation, I guess, ideally, right? Almost like it's a tool for you. It's not the runaway locomotive. It's your tool. It's your bitch, right? You take out the bitch when your tool, your favorite tool, whenever you want, right? And then you put it back.
Yeah.
And you live a life that is a quality life. That's the ideal.
So this is
if you wanted that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on something that, like, I think is really, really important, and the modern world is missing. I'm going to make a big political statement, but like one of the biggest realizations I came through through sobriety was that life isn't a binary. It's not a string of ones and zeros and yeses and nos, and there is a massive bit of grey in the middle, as Bodhi said. Like, you've got this huge fucking spectrum in the middle, and I think, like, I definitely was guilty when I was using and drinking still, of being like, no, fuck you, you're wrong, and like flagging up some limp defense to try and do that, like internally and externally, just lying to everyone to try and get my point across. And that's really, really unhealthy. So, like, me not being able to drink and not being able to do any drugs is my truth. That is true to me. It's not a universal truth. There are people out there that, as you quite rightly say, are capable of shelving that and using it in a way that they think is right, or, you know, it's not for me to tell them whether it's wrong or right. That's the way that they can do it, and they can do it. That's fine. I can't. That's true of everything in life.
Do you know what? It takes a, not only, I was going to say, a beautiful amount of power, but it takes an exceedingly large amount of as well to be able to admit that to yourself, Sven, as well. You know, like, don't get me wrong, while we're sat here going, you know, as an artist, you should be dabbling in all things, but, you know, keep it in measure. You know, it's a very easy one to say, and that's why people like Jimi Hendrix die in their 30s. That's why
20s.
you know, people die, you know, young, because they can't handle it, because they do dive too hard. And don't get me wrong, creativity is there, but they're still just diving. And I think, you know, while we're saying, you know, it's something that, from an outside perspective, from a life perspective, you need to look at it in the way that we are. I agree, Sven. You know, each person to their own in terms of how you deal with your situation. Like you said, you know, there's people out there like Snoop Dogg and Wiz Khalifa who are blazing every day. And then there's people who are, you know, you look at some comedians, you know, Bert Kreischer, for example, for years would go on stage drinking, you know, people like that. And it's, each person has either a vice, or they go, you know what, I can't have a vice, because if I do, it's bad times. Like, it will bomb out, and I can't manage that vice, so I'm not going to.
Yeah. And I would follow up just briefly on what I've seen with you, Sven. And like I said, when we started, I hadn't had the opportunity to see you prior to this, so I didn't see you when you were drinking. And Bodhi has that perspective. But what I do see is someone that's working really, really hard to be honest with themselves. And that's so hard to do, to really, you know, look in the mirror and just and be able to see all of my strengths and weaknesses for what they are. And it seems like you're doing a really good job of that. So in this journey, I'm sure that's a big part of the work that you're doing. But from an outsider, having just met you today, I just, you know, hand out a well done, mate. I can see it, and I think that you're doing an awesome job at that. So
100%.
Thank you very much. Yeah. It's and it absolutely has been a journey. I remember being still, like, in AA, there's an expression like clean but not sober. So, like, sober is a frame of mind. It comes from a word meaning like sane. And using drinking and all that kind of stuff is a form of insanity. As part of the AA thing. You might not get it or agree, but that's the line.
Yeah.
But like, for a long time in AA, I was clean but not sober. I was still on that journey, still trying to work on who I was. And I feel like the main reason I don't drink now is I'm so petrified of going back to the whole wanker I was before.
Yeah.
It's really, really kind of like I don't recognize or want to be that guy anymore. He was a douche. But like what you were just saying, like I've I think one of the things society doesn't do well enough, I think, is teach people the warning signs they should be looking out for. So like, I think maybe drugs do belong in a legal category. I think maybe they should be measured and accepted by society. I think drink probably less accepted than it currently is. But if you're going to go down that avenue with people, then teach people the warning signs and that kind of like mental health aspect. Because if you're mentally healthy, you're not going to go and drink yourself to excess. It's one of my theories on why gun crime in America is so rampant is because it's cheaper and easier to buy a gun than it is to go to a psychologist.
Yeah, you can fix your problems in a much more easy
it's a quick way,
conclusive way.
I can go through years and years of expensive therapy and tackle things I might not want to tackle, or let's go, guys. But like the warning signs are there, and for me, when I was in the thick of it, like completely fucking ignored them, and even then, like your moral compass erodes slowly over time as you go down that rabbit hole more and more and more. So like all the things that I told myself, all the creeds that I held for some reason when I was 18. Or even younger, slowly disappear, and you can be homeless, you can be abusive to someone you love, and all those kinds of things, that the checkpoints that you mentally say, I'll stop drinking when, I'll stop drinking when, I'll stop drinking when, they fly past you. And so if we as a society go through a process of being like, okay, so weed's legal, but before you go and buy a joint, you should probably sort of learn about what the bad signs of that are. And weirdly, with all the gambling adverts on television right now are doing it, and they're the ones profiteering off of the back of it, which makes me sick, but it's there. It can be done.
Yeah.
You must have seen the spate of TV ads for gambling. Like, they're everywhere at the moment. Especially you guys like sports more than I do, so they're right there next to the sports thing.
I was gonna say, on BT we get loads of them when we watch UFC events.
Talk about the line. Who's my favorite? Who's not favorite?
God, it's just a fucking nightmare.
Yeah. So stop playing when it stops getting fun. Don't play for money, play for fun. All those adverts, like, yeah, cool. Like, let's put that on the front of a Malibu advert. In fact, let's not have Malibu adverts because Malibu's shit. But let's put it on the Brewdog advert when that comes on and talk about that, the warning signs, and society can move forward. Like, I've gone to AA in Germany when I was on tour over there and all these kind of things, and it's different. I think the British society and culture towards alcohol is weird and out of whack with most of the rest of the world.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Dude, as an American and someone who grew up in Spain, who then came to England and has then traveled the world, England is fucking weird with drinking. Everyone else, like, who's watching this, who's English, if you haven't left the country and really experienced like drinking cultures in other places, it's really hard to comprehend it. But you guys do it in a really interesting way here, where it is really in excess, and it's also done like in such, like, the social activity is based around that. Like, it's like, what, just an example is like, going back to our early days of being friends, when we worked at NTT, there was a pub round the corner, and at the end of your shift, when you finished, especially on a Friday, it would be to the bank. We would all go to the bank, and it would be a collection of us. So don't get me wrong, I'm criticizing, but I'm also part of the problem.
Like the best analogy I can think of, you tucked into something completely fucking true right there. Like if you guys eat meat or vegetarian?
Vegetarian.
Yeah.
Right. Did you used to eat meat?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So when you went vegetarian, did you go through the panic of being like, what the fuck do I put in the place of the steak?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, sure.
Yeah.
Right. The way you build the plate of food is completely different when you go vegetarian or vegan. You don't have the big protein block in the middle. So
Such a good fucking metaphor. Such a good metaphor.
Right? So in British culture, fucking the pub, sitting down and drinking is the fucking steak. It is what society has told us we need in our social interactions. And when you take that out, everyone goes, where the fuck do we go now?
Yeah.
And if you look at Arab nations, they'll go sit in a fucking cafe for hours. Like, Americans will go hang out in fucking parks. In Spain, they'll go sit on the beach. And Britain's like, I want to see my MPs drinking a lager in their local before I go anywhere near that voting booth. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
It's so backwards.
That's a really good point, dude. And I think, it's super interesting. Anyone who has gone vegetarian or has tried to go veggie, you're so right. As the moment that you start eating veggie food, you're like, as a meat eater, and don't get me wrong, here's something else. I would say a lot of vegetarians are different to me specifically, and I'm not sure about you, But for me, I love meat. I will, as a vegetarian, I will say I love meat. I love steak. I love bacon. I love fucking roast chicken, lamb, goose, rabbit. I don't care.
Bit of sausage.
It's all good. Like, it all tastes amazing. But the thing that bothers me is the ethical side of it. So yeah, when I went into being vegetarian, I was like, how am I going to substitute meat? Don't get me wrong. There's now amazing meat substitutes out there.
Yeah,
and also, you can do things with vegetables. You know, you can make a butternut squash fajita and it be just as good as a meat one. And, you know, it's again, like you said, finding new ways to do it. And I think you're so right. England is so, your point of MPs having to drink in a pub is so right. It's so fucking funny.
But your point is exactly right, though. You can say you can make a butternut squash fajita that's just as good as a chicken fajita, but a meat eater would say, no fucking way. And
Yeah.
so the person in the drinking culture in Britain, when you say there's alternatives to the drinking culture, they'll say, no fucking way, because it's really, you're in the bubble. You can't come out, you can't reference the other things outside of the bubble, because your whole perspective, your reality is inside the bubble.
Yeah, and I've seen it like both ways. So I used to work, when I worked at a pub in Shepherd's Bush, my boss at the time used to genuinely, legitimately, with no sense of irony, say, if you don't, about, you know, you used to get like vegan sausages and burgers.
Yeah.
About those would say, if you don't like the meat, you don't get the shapes. Such an insane thought process to have, but fucking hilarious.
Yeah.
And like, since being sober, I've had people come up and be like, yeah, but when are you drinking again?
Yeah, you've done great. You've done a really great time. Should we have a point out there that we can celebrate your sobriety by blowing the doors off?
Yeah, like, yeah, let's go get wasted. I'm like, no, that's not happening. And I think like we go through these drives, these weird drives in the UK as well. Like we'll do a sober October, and that, I think that sets that mindset for people. Like, okay, so that person's gone sober. Like, how long for?
Yeah.
Like, no, I don't drink. What?
Yeah. And it's so strange. And, you know, talking about like bubbles and how weird that is as people, you know, seeing how, and it's funny because, again, English people, again, if you haven't experienced it, like you said, Sven, you know, in Spain, they're on the beach and blah, blah, blah. If you haven't experienced it, it's a whole different thing. But I would say like something else that maybe will be more relatable is like, if you're on social media, right, and this happened to my girlfriend Nikki, and you know Nikki, Sven, we're in Japan and it's leading up to the election, right? And Nikki's friends are very like-minded to Nikki. They are typically Labour supporters who, you know, who are very, you know, like, Remain. They're, you know, they're very liberal, I guess.
Yeah.
And which makes perfect sense. They're the people she wants to socialize with, which means that the shit she sees on Facebook is pretty damn liberal. Now, I just so happen to have a bigger spectrum of friends because at boarding school, it just so happens that you get posh twats and they typically are a bit more conservative. And so I have a big range of people who are from Tories, Lib Dems, all the way through to Labour. And so I was getting, coming up to the election, I was getting this really weird perspective because Nikki was saying to me, she's like, I'm pretty sure Labour's got this. Like, she's like, from the stuff I'm seeing on social media, Labour's got this. Like, I'm pretty sure. And I was like, oh, I'm not sure because some of the stuff I'm seeing from the other side is definitely like dampening. Like, this is not like, it doesn't seem as close as it is, you know. It doesn't seem as conclusive, like you said, sorry. And then when the actual poll came out, when that happened and Tories won by the biggest majority like ever or something ridiculous, she was blown away. It was like a complete surprise. And it's because when you're in that bubble, when you're living in that, when you're just taking what's right here and you're not like, that's all that you know.
It's the echo chamber of just everyone's messaging is the same, right? And so it starts really influencing your truth, right? Like your reality is now being affected by the echo chamber that you've created around you.
Ooh,
and it happens.
Don't worry about the camera. It's all good, dude. Just need to change the battery.
Well, we've got a little battery change. Bodhi's got about a 6-second Formula One pit stop routine that he's doing.
I'll let people on this side of the street.
More so. Yeah, and it's, dude, this is the thing right now to me, like, how do we navigate outside of our echo chambers to really appreciate other people. Like for me, I'm on social media, especially Facebook, where I pretty much am silent to observe my my friends' political views.
Mhm.
And they are on both sides of the spectrum. But they're simply on both sides of the spectrum. There's nothing in the middle. So someone will say something and it goes immediately to slagging the other for being a dumb fuck or
Right.
that whole thing. And there's just no middle ground. And to me, that area in the middle is how we save ourselves. And if
So,
we don't get there, then it's just gonna, both train tracks are going over cliffs, right?
yeah. So it's a really huge topic again.
Yeah.
There's something called. Do you know what horseshoe theory is?
No.
Right. Okay. So it's kind of what you're talking about a little bit. So horseshoe theory dictates that the further you get away from a center point, you actually meet back over here. And you're seeing it really, really frequently in politics at the moment, where the right and the left are becoming ever more increasingly authoritarian, where they're both guilty of some of the same sins. I mean, there are differences, but they're both still doing the same kind of things. And again, what you say with like, there's a group of people on the left and a group of people on the right, and they are all angry that shit's not going their ways because they can't see the grey bit in the middle. And in the middle, you have that grey bit getting ever more angry and pissed off that they're being shouted down by both the left and the right, increasingly like more and more and more and more. And there's fucking tinder pot of like just arseholes getting angry at each other and be like, nah, man. But again, like there's another thing about the sort of centrists as well. Like we've tried centrists in the UK and it didn't work. I mean, we tried it once, like. But yeah, like the echo chambers we're all growing up in. I've got so much to say on this, and it's all coming at once. I watched something recently on, I think it's still on BBC iPlayer. If you haven't watched it, do. It's 3 hours long, but do. It's called Hypernormalization by Adam Curtis, and it's a documentary about why nothing is changing in the world. And it goes into talking about the left and the right and the anger and the fact that everything is so chaotic and everything is so messy and everyone's so opinionated that nothing can change anymore, because everything's just, it's a fucking mess. Like if you threw a blancmange on the floor, you'd have to really try hard to clean it up, and that's the society that we live in now, is floor blancmange.
Yeah.
It's just really fucking messy. And there's a book you should read called The Society of the Spectacle by a French philosopher called Guy Debord, that talks about really hyper relevant now, but it talks kind of about how you can't live outside of a society. By the act of there being media and recording things, the audience are becoming part of the spectacle. And with the world we now live in, where social media is part of that world, the audience is very much in the center of the show. You have platforms like Facebook and Twitter where every Tom, Dick and Harry can put their thoughts online, and they don't have the same accountability that a journalist might. They can put things on there that are completely not true, and have no recounts for it in any way, shape or form. And that's really, really dangerous, because as much as Facebook and Twitter and all these social media platforms try and police all that misinformation out there, they can't keep up with it. And every time they try to put in some sort of policing in place, then you've got the freedom of speech stuff going on as well. Like, you are free to say what you want on the internet and in the world in general, and it doesn't have to be true. So, I mean, freedom of speech doesn't cover hate speech and bigotry and all that kind of stuff. Like, freedom of speech is not freedom from consequence, but freedom of speech does cover a lot of shit.
Yeah, I think
that's a great fucking line.
Yeah.
Freedom of speech isn't freedom of
It is. Consequences.
Thank
yeah.
you.
But I think
not my line. I'm going to put that out there, but yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, the other thing that kills me is a saying that people use a lot now, which is, well, that's your opinion, I've got my opinion, so let's just agree to disagree. Right? These are false equivalencies that are not based in, like, you cannot do that. It's being lazy, right? It's not using critical thinking. There are some opinions that are better than others. Now let's figure out which is better by going through and understanding, okay, what is your opinion based on?
Maybe not better, maybe more accurate.
Okay, more accurate, let's say.
It's so there's an LBC radio presenter called James O'Brien, which I find myself listening to increasingly, and he's really good at countering exactly that. because he'll have people come to him and give him opinion and stuff. He'll be like, okay, and then they'll be like, well, we'll disagree. They'll be like, well, no. There is no disagreement. I'm not giving you an opinion. I'm giving you facts and figures with real world examples and cases and all that kind of shit. And you're coming back at me and saying, well, I believe this. So the right word, you used it, false equivalency. Like, it's completely fallacious. They can't, opinions are invalid against other opinions. If you have a panel of experts and PhDs and all that kind of shit turning around and saying one thing as a collective, and then you put Mr. Jones from down the street who wears a tinfoil hat on Thursdays up against him, then fuck your news program.
Yeah. Here's the other thing I would say.
It's a great point. It's a great point.
It is a great point, but so many people are in this, like, my opinion is just as valid as that scientists, and that's what's killing us right now, right? Because this is the whole, like, fake news, false known truths, everyone's truth is their own, that's all this bullshit. The other thing I would say that for me is a bit of a challenge for myself, and I would offer it up to others, is if you are in your own echo chamber, to willingly find critical aspects of your echo chamber, but also find aspects of the other opposite echo chamber that you can agree with. So I'll give you an example. If I look at American politics, I would say I'm more of a Democrat, and I would say that largely I really, really have a problem with Donald Trump. My mission is to be very fair and critical about both sides, right? So if I'm going to be a Democrat, I'm not going to say that everything that is going on in the Democratic Party is okay because I hate Donald Trump so much. I'm going to say that, you know what, I actually don't, I'm kind of uncomfortable with the stuff that's coming out about Joe Biden and his own version of sexual stuff that's happening. Or his son's like, okay, there isn't like a fact trail, but it just kind of smells kind of a little bit off for me for him to be like messing around with big contracts in the Ukraine and all this other stuff. I need to be able to do that fairly and be accepted by my echo chamber. I equally need to be able to go to the other side and say, you know what, although I largely disagree with so much of what that dude is all about, I'm going to find something. Is it the North Korea thing, which is like we've been pointing like missiles at each other for so long, and I don't know, are we any better? It seems like we don't point missiles at each other as much, so maybe he's done a little bit better with that. I don't know. Another one might be, like NATO. Largely, NATO is a great thing, but he said, like, we in Europe have not really been paying our way for a long time. Is that true? If it is, that kind of feels right. Like, maybe Europe should pay a little bit more toward America helping to protect. So those are examples of a level of critical thinking that's really important right now, which is to be critical of your side and also be able to acknowledge aspects of the other side that are good, because we do that with every fucking other thing. There's nothing else in life. There's no person that you can say, I wholly accept and agree with everything that person says. There's no one that exists in your life that you can do that with, right? So why would you do it with a fucking political party and their platform?
Yeah.
You right, dude? Jeez! Jeez, son! Whoa!
Let's get a drink here. Anyway, is that a clip?
Yeah, I was gonna say, wow, we just found our clip. Jesus Christ! Wow. No, I think, you know what, Tom? I think so much of what you said is accurate, and I think it's so much of. I think the point of. Interestingly, I stand in a weird middle place with what you just said, because I actually stand in a weird place with certain things. So I would agree with you when there is facts that exist and you can look at a fact and go, and someone's going, well, I don't believe that. And you go, well, it's here and it exists and there's secondary evidence and two other people test and it's like
there's a double-blind study and there's research and
exactly. Like, to me, I'm like, cool, at that point you can't disagree with something. However, when someone, for example, like I have a friend who is religious, quite heavily so, also into conspiracies and things like that. I am not religious in any way, shape, or form. Actually, I, in some ways, despise a lot of what religion has done to the planet and despise religion as a concept as a whole. And so, however, though, when we interact, when I spend time with him, he's living his own prerogative. He's living his own truth. And don't get me wrong, I would say that evidence shows through Darwin's theories and Darwin's stuff that evolution is the correct thing. He would say that God created Earth and that, you know, water is the life form of, you know, God, but also it's like life force, and like he would say a lot of stuff that I would say is quite crazy in my opinion. However, I also go, and I'll throw this one out there too, another saying. Is the color purple that I see the same color purple that you see?
Yeah.
Is my purple your purple? Because if it's not, then yes, people are living different truths, and at that point, opinions do become more valid. However, I agree with you though, there needs to be a realm of reality within opinions that, cool, if we're going to go, cool, that's a subjective, unrealistic opinion, and you are welcome to that, okay. However, I agree with some things that are like, what are we going to do with a fucking economy? There's there's actual facts there. What are we going to do with rights for trans people? There are facts there. You know, it's like there's no fucking bullshit in opinions with that. You know, there's facts, and you need to look at the fucking facts. So I think
it comes. Oh, go on.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. It comes into to education. This is something that me and a couple of my friends talk about really frequently. We go to school and we get pumped full of maths and science and English and a few sort of tertiary subjects that because society says yes, go do the thing. And we don't learn life skills that are really important. So like, did either of you study philosophy at high school?
Yeah, a little bit.
no, not at all. I did religious studies, which fucking
Right. Oh, mate. Right. So, religious studies, religion in general, religion, in my opinion, is humanity's first attempt at philosophy.
yeah, exactly.
And like, so we were debating the world around us, trying to find a reason for everything and all that kind of stuff. And since then, you've had, you know, Diogenes and Plato and everyone, and there's a big fucking open subject. And no one religion's got it right. They might not have got it wrong. I'm not here to tell you what to believe in. But we need to be educating people on the idea that, you know, you can talk about this and you can argue about this, but you don't have to hate the person talking to you for arguing differently. And when you're presented with new information, you should probably listen to that new information. You don't have to discredit the information itself straight away. I mean, if it doesn't come like as Tom said, like a double-blind study, you're like, probably listen to that. If the information's coming off flatearthsociety.org, then probably go, no.
yeah. Yeah.
We don't teach people critical thinking. And it's something that we trust people at home to be doing. But if mum is staying at home, or you know, she is working as an accountant or whatever it is that she's doing, and dad is at home or out at work doing whatever he's doing, when mum and dad and older brother get home from whatever the fuck they are doing, are they going to spend an hour teaching their child reasoned thinking? Probably not. That's what the school system's supposed to be there for, but ultimately isn't. So we are failing people and kids because we're not teaching them that process of being able to absorb and change the way they think.
I would say even a step further. I would say critical thinking, but respectful critical thinking, where, like you said, you know, and a big part of, you know, going back to Tom's point of, you know, your echo chamber, reaching out to the other one, getting some good points, looking back at yours and having a problem, is that a lot of critical thinking that people think they're doing is actually opinionated thinking about another topic. And it's actually you going in, not going, I'm in neutral and we're going to just see what happens. It's going in going, I'm defensive and I'm already not keen on what I'm about to read or what I'm about to discuss. And a big reason why me and my friend, who is a big conspiracy theorist and religious, are able to have 5-hour conversations, which we've done in the past, about these topics, and then still get on, be best friends, and listen to the music that he makes, is because I come at it and go, tell me, please inform me about whatever your beliefs are. Like, I need to understand from your perspective so that I can give you my perspective, and then we can both either come to a conclusion that we're just not going to agree because of how different we are, but we can see similarities in what we do, or we can see reasoning from both sides. You know, And it's really beautiful. He's definitely questioned some of the shit that he believes because of thoughts I've given him. And I'll tell you what, some of the stuff that he said to me about religion, like, for example, he said to me, I'm not a religious person. I believe in God in like the Christianity track. He's like, I believe Christianity is my path. However, he goes, I don't call myself a Christian and I don't pray. I don't go to church. I don't do this kind of stuff. He's like, I do read the Bible, but that's just for me. But he's like, I don't believe religion and being part of religion is actually a real thing. He goes, I believe religion is the veil to truth. He goes, it's not that you cannot see the truth. Religion tells you the truth. It gives it to you right there. However, it shrouds it in all this mystery and all this bullshit and all this other stuff. That means that it's not a transparent sea to the truth. It's actually
a filtered.
Yeah, it's a filtered one. And you know, things like that. You know, I've come away and gone, wow,
yeah, that's a
Jesus
point.
Christ, like that's a really interesting point, you know.
Weirdly, I kind of had a really similar conversation yesterday, I think it was, sort of a friend, and he was talking about, so the Bible, I mean, if you believe the Bible is the word of God, it was written by God, then probably have a think, because like the Bible was written by a man and men are fallible.
Yeah.
Right, or a woman, and women are fallible, like just using man as shorthand, sorry,
Yeah.
everyone. But it's a book of fallibility. It can be wrong, and if you're taking it verbatim, then you're going to be wrong.
Yeah.
But if you treat it like a book of philosophy and parable, then there's probably a lot you can take away from it, the Bible or the Quran or the Torah, or any religious book. They are our first attempts as a society to give some sort of morality to our being. But the big danger that we as a society fall into, that weirdly enough happened about 2,000 years ago, is the church isn't a religious group. It is the Roman Empire given new form.
Yeah.
And the Roman Empire was a form of control. So like, do I believe in any kind of Abrahamic religious form? No. Do I think they're probably inherently evil? Maybe. But like, do I think the idea of spirituality and something more to life is completely feasible? Definitely. Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I fully, you know, I think my opinion lines up with you very much then. And I think, you know, something else, you know, you said it's these books are the first forms of philosophy that were written. And that's a really interesting way to look at it. The way, do you know what's weird? I had a weird perspective on it as well. I used to say that like religions is actually people trying to comprehend, for example, you know, talk about Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, you know, prophets in Hinduism. There's a specific guy, I can't remember his name. I actually learned a lot about him in India, but I can't remember his name at the moment. And then, you know, in Buddhism, you've got Siddhartha, so on and so forth. I think that they were the scientists of the time. You're looking at dudes who at the time may have been called alchemists, witches, wizards, you know, warlocks, you know, these kinds of, and it's this whole, like we laugh at it now as it's fantasy. Oh, it was just fantasy, you know, and Tolkien, you know, it's fantasy. There's wizards and elves, and you know, but really, I think actually there's a bigger connection with science and religion as well. Because if you look a lot at some of the theories within science and religion, especially some of the stuff written about like spiritual leaving of essences from the bodies and things like that, things that have been now measured in science, there's so much similarity. So again, it's this beautiful thing that if you're religious, you need to go look at science and learn. If you are a scientist, you need to go appreciate the people that came before you and wrote the first books that are philosophy, that were the first books of science, that were the first, you know, actual recordings of group opinion, of mass opinion. Like, this is the other thing. The world was flat forever until someone was like, I don't think it's flat. And everyone else was like, shit, we agree with you based off of the evidence that you've now presented. So now it's mass opinion that the world is round again. Don't get me wrong, if flat earthers in the next couple of years somehow manage to convince us that the world is somehow flat, the mass majority would flip back to the earth is flat. That's just how it fucking goes. So at the end of the day, yeah, there needs to be this respectful, critical thinking between people.
Yeah, based on evidence as well, and the scientific method, which is, scientific method is not proving a fact as a fact forever. This is based on
Currently
all
the
of the
fact.
knowledge that we have up till now,
Great point.
with the proviso that this may change. Yeah. Right? That's what science says, right? And if something changes it, if something starts leaning it back to, oh fuck, well, actually, if the Earth was flat and the sun was on like, the London Eye, and it kind of went around like that, it actually could work. So,
Yeah.
I mean, but
Yeah.
that's the mentality, what it has to be, which is up till today, we stand on the shoulders of every single thoughtful, scientific research, data collection that has brought us to the perspectives that we have on reality, on truth, right? And that is up for discussion as we go forward.
And do you know what? It's a great example of that is Isaac Newton discovers gravity, claims gravity. He claims that something is pulling us to the Earth. This is a theory that we still hold today. Everyone still goes, you know what? The reason I'm fucking not floating away from this fucking chair is because it's gravity. But what we then learned was that actually there's other forces. There's air resistance, there's drag, there's this, there's friction, there's other things that do stuff. Again, also magnetism. Actually, if a magnet's strong enough, it inhibits gravity. So don't get me wrong, the core theory is there. But guess what? It's fucking changed. Like, we have different opinions now.
Unless you're insane clown posse who don't believe in magnet.
Exactly. And they also don't believe in good facial makeup either, apparently.
The 90s was a weird time, mate.
So one of my absolute favorite Joe Rogan stand-up bits is he's talking about how strong edibles have gotten. And he's like, it's because the dudes that are making edibles are sat there in their Grateful Dead t-shirts, listening to the Insane Clown Posse, smelling their own farts, just dumping weed into a bucket. And they're like, I don't know if it's garden trimmings or weed at this point. I'm just chucking it. And you're like, God, that's so scarily vivid. And like,
possibly true.
Yeah, you're like, God.
Yeah, man.
It's just a good one. But yeah. You know what? We're actually coming up to the 2-hour mark. I think we'll start rounding it down.
Can I offer up?
Go for it.
Would you take us out with one more, if you've got another at hand, one more spoken word, and then we'll close the show?
Yeah, I can do.
That would be awesome, man.
Yeah.
Boom.
Nice. So I'm gonna preface this poem a little bit as well. I dated a lady who I won't name actually, but she has a condition called lupus, and if you don't know what lupus is, it's fucking horrid. It's an autoimmune deficiency. It's like your all the defense mechanisms your body have attack everything in your body. Like every day is kind of a pain or a tiredness, and it's survivable, but it's not a fun place to live. But at the same time, I was dating her. I was kind of coming to terms with my depression and my mental health stuff. So it's written around kind of like both of those points. It's really nice and light to think about on. But like it comes back to what I was saying earlier when I write. Like you need to have those ups and those downs and those balances. Yeah. Like all of my writing and experiences come from somewhere real, but I will try to put in something that's not gonna be sort of like the whole way through. So this is a poem called Broken. Some days I fail to wake her. Normally after the world tries to break her, she just lays there, stays there, partly aware of my stare, but partly departed to elsewhere, and I have to shake free of my urge to shake her. It's not what she needs, just a symptom of my care as I try to share in her nightmare. No, instead I just stroke her hair. Tried to calm the werewolf engulfed there, but probably managing fuck all. She, as if to stave away the end of days, rolls in her duvet, an apocalypse eclipsed with sheets in the way, then struggles to raise with claws made of clay, pauses to say, ow, and then falls to the hay. Heavy with inability to even breathe, her lungs are flightless, there's no air left in her atrium, it's true, she's broken, every joint is swollen, gone seizing to frozen, she is grieving for freedom stolen, half human, half golem, she gives in. Too weak to be dealing with the week she is only one day into, these days are my Everest, and I am climbing, when I see her turn full bloom against the rocks, and it knocks these words from my chest. I would take every beast in your body, every cell into myself if it would give you one day in the clouds where I see you, peaking. You are a bedbound explosion, bleeding light from your pillow fort, arcing energy from your Faraday mattress. It can't contain you. You are a knight riding in on the day, sword to the sun, slaying the monsters under our heads. This four-post castle is a battleground. You, Battleborn, battered a massive rule here. You own this war. It's yours. You ride across my sky, casting aside storm clouds. There is no black in our blue, no pain in our bruise. Rumbles run scared, their thunder sundered as white horses flee your chariot, whipped with pillow fights and feathers flying. These days where I can't wake you, they break me. Cast me down, leave me drowning like tar poured from your battlements or a phone lost down the headboard. But you find me, carry me to safety, text me back into myself with a dream brand across my chest that melts into my breastplate and gives me hope armor. Together, back to back, we make our stand on bed springs, face to face with the siege, and every day we breach them and every day we live. It's why my definition of the word strong begins and ends with a picture of you here, joints swollen, brain fogged, unable to move, and cradling me and reading poetry. Because I wasn't strong enough to face the thought of another day. So please, read with my dictionary. Face the dawn with me. I know by now our wounds tessellate. But let's compare our scars.
Nice. Holy shit, dude. That one was fucking banging. It felt like somewhere in the middle there we hit Eminem's speed rapping verse and geez, dude, that was beautiful. That was majestic. So much, obviously a lot of pain and beauty within that relationship at the time, and you know what, that was absolutely insane, dude.
Thanks for taking us to a really cool ending, bro. Really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
The whole thing, the conversation was really, for me, quite enjoyable tonight. So thank you so much for being part of that.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation as well.
Tooks, before we end this off, dude, couple of things. First of all, shout anything. I know you got a book coming up. Shout that out. Shout out your social medias. Do all that kind of stuff, dude.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do have a book coming out. It's called This Is Your Tragic Backstory. It's going to be lots of poetry like that, a journey through my journey from being an angry tosspot to somewhere a bit beyond that now. The line itself is taken from a line in a poem, which is, if you're waiting for a hero, this is your tragic backstory. So it's not meant to be maudlin and navel gazing. It's supposed to be empowering and for you to realize that bad shit gets better.
That's a dope metaphor, dude. I freaking love that.
Thank you, man. I'm on Facebook. My Facebook is at Sven Stears. My Twitter handle is Poetry Sven Writes. I think my Instagram handle is Poetry Sven Writes as well. But there aren't many Sven Stearses in the world. So if you put Sven Stears in, it'll come the fuck up. I've got my own website. I think it's Weebly website. It's weebly.svenstears.com, and that'll come on as well. And yeah, big shout out to my publisher, Whiskey and Beards Publishing. If you want to get into poetry, that's a good place to go. They've got a really good repertoire of poets on there. And yeah, thank you to everyone who's bared with me whilst I've been an angry, barely human person, and waited for me to get better and get to the point where I can be in a state to thank you for bearing with me. So yeah, that'll do.
You know what, dude, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. In terms of just, you know, for you and me, dude, I knew you when you were in a bad place, dude, and I know the battle that you went through. I saw it on days when we worked together. I saw the goods, the bads, the funnies, because there was a lot of those. And dude, you are an incredible human being. And I'll tell you that that's not just me saying that. Here, I can tell you that that's been reflected by Nikki. When we bumped into you the other day, she also said the exact same thing. We're really proud of you, dude, and great to see you fucking kicking ass and taking names, dude. And be sure we'll make sure that we have a copy of This Is Your Tragic Backstory as part of the set when it comes out, dude.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I'll either mail it or hand deliver it. Hopefully, we'll be in a position where we can do live shows, and I'll be throwing them in at the audience like, read this.
That would be sick, dude. That would be
season
sick.
2, man.
Yeah, season 2 for sure. We'll have you back.
Thank you.
Final thing before we go. Re-shout out to Kitchen guys, each week doing amazing takeaway deals by an amazing chef with 30 years of experience. Other than that, guys, again, Tukes has been a part of this journey. Every single person who has watched this tonight and every single person who likes, follows, shares, interacts with us has been a part of us growing this channel. We really appreciate that. We are trying to do everything we can to bring you great content, bring you amazing guests like this incredible man right here. So please hit us with that Holy Trinity. Share at least one of the posts. We don't care which one. Share a post. Like the Facebook page and follow it so you can stay up to date with when we're doing the podcast, who the guests are. And then finally, subscribe to the YouTube channel because that is where we keep all of the podcasts. You can find the whole library there. And there's one for every single fucking person. There is always a podcast for you. We guarantee it.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, guys. Take care.